Greetings, Embers, newbies, and the peekaboos. Welcome to Back to Ashes. I'm your host, Phoenix. Before we begin, if you enjoy the way I narrate these stories, a subscribe, like, comment, or share would be appreciated. I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the elite members of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for remaining the pillars upon which this channel stands. I cannot express my gratitude enough. Thank you. If this is your first time with the channel and you are interested in learning how to become a member, all that information can be found down below, along with the Buy Me a Coffee. Without further ado, it is now time to go back to ashes. For once we arise from the ashes, we are bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled 2024, Your Favorite True Stories, Part 2. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad. I'll read the second story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. Disclaimer, this video is for educational and entertainment purposes. A fictional piece entitled, I Found a Time Capsule with a Letter Inside That Predicted My Death. The past few months have been an absolute whirlwind for me. For years, I was a struggling writer, dreaming of becoming the next great American author. But I simply couldn't break into the literary industry. I survived for a time on freelance jobs ranging from article writing and blogging to copywriting and editing. They say every dog has his day. Mine arrived nearly 2 years ago when my debut horror novel, Fragments of Fear, exceeded my wildest expectations and became an unexpected hit. It landed on the New York Times bestseller list with reviews describing it as an atmospheric and chilling journey into the depths of human darkness. I hadn't reached Stephen King levels of name recognition, but copies of my book were front and center in bookstores. I even got to go on a 10-city book signing tour and participate in a few talk show interviews. My brush with fame made me weary of the limelight. So, with the earnings of my book sales, I purchased a 2-story house in the suburbs. The house wasn't extravagant, but it was far removed from the bustling city and the demanding publishing industry. It became my sanctuary, a place to find solace, recharge my creative energy, and explore my imagination without distraction. It was an older house and required some work, but I was excited at the prospect of making it my own. At the top of my to-do list was refurbishing the large backyard. I had always envisioned starting a family and imagined barbecues and children playing in the yard. Unfortunately, years of neglect had turned the backyard into a dense jungle of weeds and poison oak. I spent the better part of an afternoon meticulously mowing the lawn and pulling weeds. Afterward, I began planting a new garden. While digging a hole in the soil for some potted flowers next to an old oak tree, my spade hit something solid. The metallic clang reverberated throughout the air. Fearing that I had struck a water or gas pipe, I put my spade down and carefully brushed away the loose soil with my gloved hands. What I uncovered was a small weathered metal box buried just below the surface. The box was light but sturdy. A blend of excitement and curiosity took over as I gently pried the box open with the head of my spade. Inside was a collection of old black and white family photographs of a couple and their young daughter. There were also trinkets, likely of sentimental value to the box's owner. A tarnished silver locket with a picture of a Labrador retriever, a small vial of sand, and a porcelain figurine of a ballerina. Based on the content, I surmised it was some sort of time capsule. But what made my blood run cold was a sealed envelope bearing my full name and the current date written in cursive. This was impossible. Judging by the photographs, The box must have been buried sometime in the 1920s. I dropped everything I was doing and brought the box inside. Opening the envelope, I found a letter that read, "Dear Mr. Travers, if you are reading this, just know in 5 days your life will end. We know this because we were the ones who brought about your demise. We apologize for this harsh reality, but implore you to understand the desperation that compels us. We seek to bring back our daughter, Lily, from the clutches of death, and your sacrifice is the price demanded. We deeply regret the burden we have placed upon you, extending across time. Please know our intentions are not cruel, but driven by unconditional love. We understand the enormity of this request. May you find some solace in knowing that your sacrifice holds the promise of restoring Lily's future. With heartfelt gratitude, Evelyn and William Hastings. P.S. As a small consolation, we have provided you with a glimpse into the upcoming week. A separate sheet listed the dates for the next 5 days, each with a mysterious prediction. July 15th, a stranger will cross your path, seeking a favor. July 16th, a creature of the night will find its way into your sanctuary. July 17th, the sky will weep for you, but you will find only darkness in these tears. July 18th, your most beloved creation will betray you. July 19th, through flames, a cherished life will be consumed. After reading this, I was left in a state of confusion and disbelief. There was no way this letter could be real, I thought. I'd had my fair share of obsessive fans sending me ideas for my next novel or their unedited manuscripts. It wasn't a stretch to imagine that a deranged fan or a prankster with a twisted sense of humor had discovered my new address and devised this elaborate hoax. Whoever was behind it, I had to give them credit for their creativity. They had the makings of a great horror writer. I returned the contents to the box, closed the lid, and set it aside. I made a mental note to change all the locks, then returned to my yard work. The next day, I was busy patching a crack in my living room wall when I heard a heavy knock at the door. I wasn't expecting any visitors, so I slowly opened the door a crack, keeping the chain lock still in place. Standing on my porch was a man in his late 40s, tall and lean, with disheveled brown hair and a scruffy beard. "Yes, can I help you?" I asked wearily. "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you," he began, "but my car broke down in front of your house. I think the carburetor is busted." He pointed at a blue sedan with its hood popped up and smoke billowing from the engine. I sized him up with suspicion. I remember the prediction about a stranger crossing my path. I hadn't thought the letter had literally predicted a stranger coming to my house and asking for help. Instead, I wondered if this guy was the one who had buried the box in my backyard as a prank. Cautiously, I offered to call a tow truck for him while he waited outside. He happily agreed and closed the door behind me and called the towing company. The man patiently waited on my front porch until the truck arrived. He thanked me with a smile and left with the truck driver. For the remainder of the day, I peered out of my window to see if the stranger returned, but I never saw him again. I convinced myself that it was just a coincidence, and as far as coincidences go, it wasn't the most absurd. Stranger things have happened. The following day, the bizarre time capsule and its unsettling prophecy still occupy the forefront of my mind. However, when my agent called, inquiring as to why I hadn't replied to his multiple emails, I was thrust back into the reality of my professional obligations. The publisher had been breathing down his neck due to my delay in submitting drafts for my much-anticipated second novel. I was contractually bound to deliver a complete draft by the year's end. "Just one more chapter, Alex," he pleaded. "A rough draft, anything. It'll pacify them for at least a month. I'll have it ready by the end of the week," I assured him, placating his concerns. Secluding myself in my office, I faced my laptop with grim determination. I vowed not to leave for any reason until I'd accomplished a writing goal of 2,000 words. By 10 p.m., I was sitting in the dark with my laptop screen as the only source of light. I had managed to produce only about 1,000 words. Feeling somewhat claustrophobic in my small, stuffy office, I opened the window to let the crisp night air sweep in, carrying the scent of wet grass and the faint rustling of leaves. I took a deep breath and leaned back into my chair, closing my eyes for a moment. Suddenly, a loud flapping sound jolted me back to reality. I jumped from my chair, my heart pounding in my chest. From the darkness of the night, a shadowy figure swooped into my office. Panicked, I ducked. My mind rushed back to the note's prophecy about a creature of the night. Was this it? The figure collided with my bookshelf, sending books showering to the floor, and hooted loudly before landing on my desk. Gathering my courage, I switched on the desk lamp. The room was instantly bathed in a warm glow, revealing my intruder. A barn owl. With an eeriness that sent a chill down my spine, the owl slowly turned its head almost 360 degrees, like a scene straight out of The Exorcist, observing its surroundings. I had never been this close to an owl before, and I hadn't realized how large they could get. This particular one was almost the size of a young child. "Hey there, easy now," I said, grabbing a flashlight from my desk. I slowly approached it, still crouched with my flashlight arm extended. Before I could get very far, the owl spread its wings wide. With a powerful flap, it took off again, sweeping across my office, flying straight out of my window. My meticulously organized notes fell victim to the gust created by the owl's wings, scattering across the room like confetti. I poked my head out the window and followed the bird with a flashlight beam. I saw it glide into the tree line. It was slightly unnerving how its flapping wings barely made a noise. It perched on a branch, turning its head around to look back at me, its massive eyes reflecting back my light. I jumped back, shutting the window with a bang. As I paced around the room, cleaning up the mess that the owl had created, I felt a sense of unease. One prediction coming true I could pass off as a coincidence, but this one was so oddly specific. I was starting to fear for my life. But what could I do? Go to the police? I would be sent for a psych evaluation before I even finished my story. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. Instead, I stayed up, researching everything I could find about the history of the house and the family in the photograph. The articles I found about the house revealed that it was built in the 1880s and had changed hands several times before being bought by a young couple, William and Evelyn Hastings, in 1921. They had a daughter named Lily Margaret Hastings in 1922. I found a news article from 1927 titled "Miracle Child Thought Dead Wakes Up at Funeral." The article revealed that Lily had fallen into a frozen lake when she was 5. She wasn't breathing when her father pulled her out and was declared dead. As embalming wasn't common at the time, her funeral was held the very next day. As they were lowering her casket into the grave, mourners heard faint scratching from within. When they ripped open the lid, they found the child shaken but very much alive. Doctors were baffled as to how she had survived. The theory posted in the article was that the icy water had put her into a deep coma where her breathing and heartbeat were too faint to detect. The other significant thing I found was an obituary for Lily from 2019. She had lived a long, full life and passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 97. She was survived by 2 children, 6 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. The obituary noted her love for dogs and the beach, and her career as a professional ballerina. That explains the trinkets, I muttered to myself. The obituary was written by her granddaughter, Hannah Sullivan, who was the local head librarian. I glanced at my watch. It was already 5 a.m. Morning brought a dense layer of cloud cover. As predicted, a sudden and violent storm swept over the neighborhood, casting a shadowy gloom that echoed my inner turmoil. My rational side still insisted that this was all an elaborate prank, but the creeping doubt in my mind was growing stronger with each passing hour. I reasoned that if anyone had answers, it would be Hannah Sullivan. I looked up the library where she worked and saw that it was only a 20-minute drive away. I waited for the storm to break before heading out. By 10 a.m., the storm showed no signs of letting up, but I was desperate for answers. I tucked the letter and photos into my coat pocket and ran to my car. I drove through the rain-soaked roads, the wipers screeching as they moved across the windshield. As I pulled into the library's parking lot, I noticed it was nearly empty, with only a few cars present. The library itself was a Victorian building that looked like it had been recently remodeled. Entering the library, I found it almost deserted except for a young woman at the reception desk. She was engrossed in a book, her glasses perched on her nose and her dark hair tied up in a messy ponytail. I glanced at what she was reading and saw that it was a copy of my book. I approached her gingerly. I was soaking wet and still unsure of how to explain my strange predicament without sounding stark mad. As I neared the desk, she looked up, setting her book aside and offering me a warm smile. "Hello," she said, her eyes brightening behind her glasses. "Can I help you find anything?" "I'm actually here to find Hannah Sullivan," I replied, meeting her gaze. "I read that she works here." The woman looked at me with suspicion. "May I ask who is asking for her?" she asked. I knew I couldn't tell her my true reason for needing to see her. I had one literal card to play. I pulled out a business card from my pocket and slid it across the desk. She read it, her eyes widening. "The Alex Travers? The author of Fragments of Fear?" she asked excitedly. She checked the photo on the inside of her book's jacket to confirm. I concocted a convincing lie about wanting to research local lore for my next novel, and after offering to sign her copy of the book, she was more than happy to lead me to a small office tucked away in the corner of the building. She knocked lightly on the door before opening it. "Miss Sullivan, there's someone here to see you." "It's Alex Travers," the young librarian added in a giddy tone. Hannah looked up from her computer screen, surprised by the interruption. She was a striking woman in her early 30s, her ginger hair pulled back in a neat bun, freckles scattered across her cheeks. Her eyes, a brilliant emerald green, regarded me with curiosity. She seemed far less impressed with my presence than her colleague. "Thank you, Amber," she said to the young woman. Amber lingered at the door, hoping to be a part of the conversation, but she got the hint to leave when she saw that everyone was just standing awkwardly in silence. "Mr. Travers, please, have a seat," Hannah said, her tone cordial but guarded. "To what do I owe the unexpected visit?" I sat down in the chair across from her. I hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. But decided to get straight to the point. I explained to her that I had recently bought her great-grandparents' house. I reached into my coat pocket and retrieved the weathered photos, laid them on her desk. Hannah's eyes slightly widened as she studied the pictures of her ancestors. "I found these in my backyard a couple of days ago," I said. "They were in a box buried near the old oak tree." There was a flicker of surprise on her face, quickly replaced by a look of concern. There was a moment of silence as she traced her finger over the images of the young girl in the picture. "And the letter?" she started. "Was there a letter in the box?" I was shocked. I hadn't even mentioned the letter yet. "How do you know there was a letter?" I asked, perplexed, handing her the 2 handwritten sheets of paper. She examined the letter carefully. "This is my great-grandmother's handwriting," she said. "But how did she know my name or the current date?" I stammered, the fear creeping back into my voice. I just don't understand. I've heard the stories, but I don't think any of it was true," she spoke, talking more to herself than to me. What stories?" I demanded. Hannah looked at me, her eyes filled with empathy. She sighed deeply and began. "Mr. Travers, my family has a rather complicated history. My great-grandmother Evelyn was a spiritualist. She held seances, believing she could communicate with the dead. You've no doubt read about my grandmother Lily's story?" I nodded in confirmation. "Well, there's a family legend that when Lily drowned in the lake, her mother made a deal with the spirit world to bring her back," she continued. "What was the deal?" I probed. "A life for a life," she answered. "Not the life of anyone she knew, but that of someone who would live in the house in the distant future." I thought about what she said for a moment, and suddenly it all clicked. "Wait, so you're saying Evelyn traded my life to save her daughter?" I asked. In a sense, yes," she confirmed. "This is my life. Do I not get a say in this?" I argued. Hannah sighed. You have to see it from her perspective. She was getting her only child back in exchange for the life of a complete stranger who wouldn't even be born in her lifetime. What parent wouldn't make that deal? This is insane. Is there any way to reverse this? I asked, anxiety in my voice. The rain outside echoed my desperation, fiercely hitting the library's windows. Hannah's face fell. "I don't know. This isn't something I've ever dealt with. As far as I know, no one's ever tried. You can't just undo 3 generations of my family's existence. Her words were cut off by a sudden crash of thunder. The room darkened as the power went out. Only the sporadic flashes of lightning illuminated the space. "Damn it!" I shouted, more from fear than anger. I got up abruptly, knocking my chair to the floor. "Are you messing with me? Is this your idea of a joke?" I accused, fumbling in the darkness towards the door. Hannah gasped, clearly taken aback by my reaction. "No, I swear. I wouldn't joke about something like this. I didn't want to hear the rest. I pushed my way out of the office, navigated the dark library, and found my way to the exit. Outside, the storm was raging, but I didn't care. My mind was spinning, caught in a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. The rain quickly soaked through my clothes, but it did little to dampen the fiery panic consuming me. I sat in my car, staring at the list of prophecies. The next to the last one worried me almost as much as my own impending demise. As I read the phrase, "Your most beloved creation will betray you," one more time, a shiver ran down my spine. My first thought was of my book, my characters. But how would fictional characters turn on me? I wondered. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, trying to piece together the cryptic prophecy. I pored over my manuscript, searching for any character or plot point that could possibly betray me. I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't even remember falling asleep. But I was awakened by a news alert on my phone. The headline sent a chill through my veins. Fanatical reader commits heinous murder, recreates scene from fragments of fear. It felt as if the floor had given way beneath me. As I read the gruesome facts of the crime, my heart pounded frantically. The fan, a man named Robert Miles, was reportedly obsessed with my work, especially the serial killer character, Orion West, from my book. He had been apprehended after strangling his wife, which he claimed was in homage to one of Orion's most brutal killings. Feeling nauseated, I dropped my phone. My mind was racing. In a state of panic, I contacted every spiritualist, paranormal expert, and occultist I could find. All were either incredulous, dismissive, or too eager to exploit my desperation. None were able to offer anything concrete or even plausible. I contemplated boarding a plane and fleeing to the farthest corner of the world. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how pointless that would be. The prophecy wasn't tied to the house. It was tied to me, and there was no escaping myself. On the morning of July 19th, I woke up with a sense of dread. The final prediction was to be fulfilled that day. Despite the comfort of daylight, the threat felt imminent. The morning passed in a blur, my thoughts consumed by what was to come. The knock on my door in the afternoon startled me. When I opened it, I found Hannah standing there. Her green eyes were filled with a strange mixture of apprehension and hope. She held an old book in one hand and a large bag slung over her shoulder. "Mr. Travers, I'm sorry to show up unannounced," she began, "but I couldn't stop thinking about our encounter yesterday. I think I might have a solution for you." "Do you?" I asked, trying not to raise my hopes. "Yes, if I may come in?" she asked. "Please, come in," I responded, leading her inside. Once inside, she laid the book on my dining room table. "I spent all night going through my great-grandmother's old books of spells and rituals," she explained. "And I found this." She opened the book, directing my attention to a particular page. "Life transference spell?" I read, where her finger indicated. "I believe Evelyn used the spell to transfer Lily's death onto you," she explained. "Is there a ritual or something to reverse the spell?" I asked. "There is, but there's a catch," she replied, looking at me seriously. "Okay, what's the catch?" I asked nervously. "If we do this, it will change everything," she warned, her voice grave. "You'll effectively erase all the events in your life that led you to this house, to this moment." I looked at her. "What do you mean by erase?" "The spell, as it works, will shift the trajectory of your life away from your current path," Hannah clarified. "Your memories and experiences, they will all remain intact. However, to the world around you, it will be as if fragments of fear never happened. You would have taken a different path in life, one that wouldn't have led you to writing that particular book and the fame it brought you. But this was my life's work, my dream, I stammered, feeling a lump forming in my throat. I dedicated years to writing, to getting my book out there, and now you're telling me I have to give it all up? Hannah's expression softened, her eyes showing a glimmer of sympathy. Mr. Travers, Alex, I'm so sorry you had to be put into this position. You did nothing to deserve it. It's an awful decision to make, but there's no alternative. Hannah's revelation was a punch to the gut. I had been prepared for many things. A better battle against unseen forces. A final plea for mercy to the spirits. But not this. I was being asked to forfeit the very foundation of my identity, my successes, my accomplishments. To live on, but as a phantom in a life that could have been. What's the point of living if I'm left with nothing? I wondered out loud. Hannah placed a comforting hand on mine. I know it's a lot of pressure to put on one person, but you'll still have you with all of your hopes, dreams, and passions. You'll still have the capacity to love, to feel, to experience life. Isn't that worth preserving? She asked. I kept my head down, considering my options. Finally, I looked up, meeting Hannah's worried gaze with resolve. All right, I declared, my voice steadier than I felt. Let's do it. What do we need to do? Hannah let out a relieved sigh before giving me a weak smile. I've brought most of the items we need for the ritual already. We'll also need a copy of your book. Okay, I'll get it, I said. We cleared a spot under the oak tree in my backyard, formed a stone circle, and built a fire in the center. The sun was already setting when we finished. Holding a copy of my book in my trembling hands, I exchanged a glance with Hannah. The enormity of our decision hung heavy between us. You have to do this. This is your life, she reiterated, her voice shaking with emotion. I nodded, unable to muster a response. I held my book over the flame, the heat nipping at my fingers. My heart sank as I remembered the countless hours, days, and months I had invested in creating this story. It was more than just a book to me. It was a piece of my soul, and I was about to just watch it burn. Before I could second-guess myself, I dropped it into the flames. The book caught fire instantly, the pages curling and blackening in the fire. A sharp pang of loss shot through me, but I pushed it aside. Hannah interlaced her fingers with mine as we watched the fire. The atmosphere grew warmer, the flames reflecting in her emerald eyes. She started to chant in an unfamiliar language, her voice growing louder and more forceful as she went on. I watched in awe as the fire seemed to dance in rhythm with her words. I could hear the echoes of other voices, disembodied and inhuman, chanting along with her. As she continued, I felt her hand growing cold and her grip weakening. Then, her hand seemed to slip through my fingers like a fistful of sand. She raised her hand. I could see her horrified eyes through her translucent palm. "What's happening?" she cried out in terror. I hesitated for a moment, then turned my gaze back to the flames. Her eyes followed mine. The fire had burned through the cover of the hardback, revealing pages crossed out with a marker and her grandmother's silver locket hidden between them. I'm sorry, Hannah, I confessed, my voice choked with guilt. I just couldn't give it all up. You altered the spell, she stammered, her form flickered and gradually fading. You erased my family. Yes, I admitted, my heart heavy. I had to. You said it yourself. A life for a life. The look of betrayal on her vanishing face was unmistakable. She opened her mouth, perhaps to say something, but before she could, she disappeared completely, leaving me alone in a cool summer night. I stood there staring at the flame until it burned itself out. I felt alone, inside and out. I went back inside, and out of morbid curiosity, I looked up the obituary for Lily Hastings. It stated that she had died at the age of 5 after falling into the frozen lake. There was no miracle. She was simply dead. I did feel remorse for Hannah. She was just trying to help me and didn't deserve to be wiped from existence. But I hadn't asked to sacrifice my life for her grandmother. My life had been hijacked, used, and manipulated. All I did was reclaim it. My next novel, Echoes of the Past, was another critical and commercial success. The world saw the triumphant return of a favorite author, not knowing the ghosts that lingered behind my success. Out of a sense of guilt, I dedicated the novel to Hannah Sullivan, Lily Hastings, and all those forgotten. Stalkers. So this happened when I was in college. I would often use the computer labs on campus because at the time I didn't have my own computer, and a lot of my assignments involved some sort of electronic component. And then I would hang out there or other areas of campus because I didn't really have many friends other than the few I had made there. So I would hang out with them and such. Sometimes I would be there kind of late because I also tutored, so it wasn't uncommon for me to be there after dark. During college, I kind of came out of my shell a bit more and was more inclined to talk to people I didn't know. One day in the computer lab, I was working on my latest story. I've been writing since I was 11, which happened to be a horror story. This one kid, whose name I never did get, by the way, sat down next to me, even though the lab only had a few other people in it. I didn't think too much of it, especially when this guy started talking to me. He was actually being kind of flirty, which, is usually flattering. So I figured he just thought I was cute or something. He wasn't really my type. For one thing, I hadn't realized that I liked guys yet. And for another, he was kind of emo. That was when emoism was big. And I wasn't really into that anyway. But you don't have to be attracted to someone to talk to them. So I was nice and chatted with him a bit, even though I really wanted to write. Eventually, this guy asked me what I was working on, and I told him. He thought I was super cool and said he was a writer too, and that piqued my interest because I didn't know a lot of writers at the time. So I asked him what he wrote, and he said it was predominantly horror as well. He told me that he was writing a story with his friends in it, and that it was a slasher, like Scream. Well, those are interesting to me, and I didn't think much of his friends in it until he said, I just really wanted to write a story where my friends are like brutally murdered or whatever. That was verbatim. I remember it very clearly. Well, that was super weird, and he got even weirder when he asked if I wanted to read it. I kind of waffled a bit about it, not wanting to be rude, and then I made an excuse to leave when he kind of got intense about it. Later that night, I was home and got a friend request from someone I didn't know. That was during the MySpace era, and this guy's URL and name on the site was BloodChow666. I knew right away who it was even before I went to his profile. I was surprised that it wasn't weirder, so I wanted to be polite and accepted his request. That was a mistake. He began sending me parts of his story, and dear God, it was even worse than it sounded. When he told me about it, not only were his friends getting killed, he was writing them in extremely sexual scenarios, and the death scenes were very, very violent. I wanted to stop reading, but my friend Ashley, who'd been in the room when I met this guy, wanted to keep reading it, so I did with her. We were basically what the fucking the entire time, because holy shit, it was weird and morbid and dark and made me extremely uncomfortable. I deleted him eventually from MySpace and then blocked him, not wanting to talk to him ever again. Well, this guy wouldn't let it go. He'd find me alone on campus, wanting to know why I deleted my MySpace, which is what I told him. And I worried about what he'd do if he found out the truth. He became very insistent that I keep reading his story, and he kept following me around trying to give me pages. I debated telling someone, but I was young and naive and thought maybe he was just lonely. However, he was really starting to scare me, especially when he'd find me alone in the parking lot at night. More than once, I had to quickly get into my car and lock the door right away. He didn't exactly chase me, but he might as well have. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it ended. I never saw or heard from him again, and I think maybe he dropped out. At the time, I was dealing with a different stalker situation, so I didn't question it. I was just grateful. So, Blood Chow 666, let's not ever meet again. Stalker story. This story happened just a few years back when I was visiting an old friend in Cologne, while at the same time taking advantage of him as a free stay for a meeting with my LARP group. For those who don't know what LARP is, it's basically real-life role-playing. Imagine a Dungeons and Dragons game, but instead of people sitting around a table with dice, you have people actually dressed up as their characters, actually role-playing in real life. LARPing was my hobby since I was 14, and after I got a job that paid pretty well, I started to go a bit more all out when it came to stuff for my hobby. One of those things I spent a solid amount of money on was my character's armor, important for this story, the chainmail I wear under my outer armor. After the meeting of my group, I got mostly out of the LARP outfit because I really didn't want to walk around Cologne Mulheim, which is one of the more dangerous places in the city, as a medieval knight. But since I couldn't fit it all in my back, I kept my chainmail on, as well as my tunic and pants. On my bus ride home, I noticed some guys seemed to have an eye on me, but I guess it was because I still looked very out of place. When he got on the same station as me, I didn't really pay him much attention. I was almost at my friend's place and decided to call him, asking if we should meet and get a Donner, which he agreed to before I even ended my question. I arrived at our meeting spot first and waited. Then I noticed that guy from the bus again, who now walked straight towards me. I got closer to the wall to make space, but he didn't pass me. He stopped before me and pulled a knife on me, demanding my bag, wallet, and phone. I was willing to give him my wallet, but tried to explain that my bag only had some armor and foam weapons. But it seems that even just talking was enough to set this guy off, and suddenly I felt two fast, stinging punches in my stomach. It hurt like hell, and I dropped down and the guy grabbed my bag. Honestly, the next things are not really in my mind. I was barely able to notice anything other than the voice in my head screaming, "You got stabbed." So, the next thing I noticed was my friend shaking me. My bag was open and my stuff all over the place, and he was holding my helmet with blood on it. As he said it, he saw the guy throwing my stuff around after the bag was most likely too heavy and big for him. So my friend, seeing me on the ground, managed to grab the first thing he could, which was the helmet, and bashed the guy with it until he ran away. We later checked my stomach, and even though I had 2 giant deep blue bruises which hurt like hell, I only had small cuts since the chainmail stopped the knife. Until this day, I get sick in the stomach when I think back on that day, and remember that if I had not worn a piece of my LARP clothing that day, I would be dead, literally killed over a bag of costumes, 150 euros in my wallet, and a 10-year-old phone. This world really is fucked up. Haunted houses. I know I'm late to the party, but I've had many experiences in multiple houses, so here's one of them. My dad bought the neighbor's house when I was about 12 or 13. The neighbors built it in the 70s, so we knew no one had died there or anything. But we have no idea what may have happened on the land before that. Before we even moved in, the neighbor's son woke up in the middle of the night to all the blades flying off his ceiling fan. Multiple blades got stuck in the wall and one in the closet door. He ran to the closet and screamed until his parents came in. There were still marks as they filled in the holes when we moved in. That room became my baby brother's nursery. One day, my stepmom needed to change him, but she didn't want to go all the way to the bedroom. So she asked me to go grab a diaper and wipes. When I walked into the room, a book flew off a stack of boxes we hadn't unpacked and landed right in front of me, directly under the fan. I stepped over it, grabbed what I needed, and ran out of the room. Multiple people in my family saw a shadow of a man in the hallway. The hallway was a long L-shaped hallway with only 2 lights. Myself and 2 of my brothers slept in the room at the very tip of the short side of the L. My dad's room was across from ours, and my baby brother's nursery was in between. We would see the man at the end of the hallway. We could never reproduce the shadow, but it wasn't always there. We had a tapestry on the wall right where he stood, and the shadow would be on top of the tapestry. One night when I was catching a movie and my 2 brothers were asleep, I saw the shadow of a man crawling into the room into the darkness. I thought it was my dad trying to scare us, which he did often. But he then opened the door to his room, and there was nothing there. Scared the absolute shit out of me. There was also a woman that my dad and stepmom saw in the house. I never saw her. She would peek around corners, and you could see her long hair swish. It scared my stepmom so bad one time, she fell while getting into the shower and broke a rib. Many of us also saw a little boy who would run through the dining room. I would catch glimpses of him out of the corner of my eyes. But my stepmom woke up one night to him standing over her before running off down the hallway. She said she would have written it off as one of my brothers, but the hallway had wood floors, and there were no footsteps as he ran off. Eventually, my older brother moved into my dad's office. I got the nursery as my bedroom, and my 2 younger brothers started sharing the room with the bunk beds. One night I was reading when my closet door randomly began opening and closing all on its own. I said out loud, "Can you please not do this in my room?" It stopped, and I never had issues in that room again. My youngest brother, however, was about 2 or 3 now and began acting weird. He would walk out of his bedroom and sit in the living room, and when asked why he wasn't in his room, he would say, "The man was in there." My dad obviously ran into the room, worried about an intruder, but there was no one there. This happened a few more times until one day my little brother walked straight to the closet by the front door where his baseball bat was. When he was asked what he was doing, he said he was going to get the man out of his room. My dad just let him be, and he never talked about the man after that. I have so many more stories from that house, but this is getting really long. Weirdly enough, one of my brothers never saw anything, and my older brother only experienced a couple of things moving without explanation. When my dad moved, I was about 17 at the time, it all stopped. I didn't experience anything for a couple of years, until I moved into a house in college with my boyfriend and another friend. But it was totally different. Doppelgangers, a helpful entity, and weird sightings of shadow people. My cousins also built a house on a piece of land they later found out was an abandoned graveyard that the developers reworked. I only visited once, but I saw a few things. They moved out pretty quickly. According to my grandmother, who has lots of issues and was an addict, so take it with a grain of salt. The women in our family are sensitive to spirits, but it skips a generation. So she claimed she was sensitive. Her grandmother was, and when I told her about my dad's house, she said I likely was too. Our family is from New Orleans, so people really believe in that stuff here. And after years and years and hundreds of experiences, I can't deny that she may have been onto something. Haunted houses. I have friends who lives approximately 2 blocks from my home. They invited me over to see their place, and while going on the tour, we walked down the stairs from the upper level and felt a significant shove to the back of my left shoulder. I laughed it off as I thought it was a friend still up there, but when I turned, no one was there. This was my first experience. Second experience was a night while we were having a get-together with multiple people outside grilling. We had music playing and generally having fun. We were listening to a CD that ended, but we just kept socializing when a loud, disturbing voice said my name that seemed to come from the speakers. Everyone immediately looked my way and were freaked out, but alcohol kept the party going. Third experience, I visited to help put up a fence. After completing the fence, my friends left to go get food while I stayed with my dogs. My phone started to ring, and I saw it was my friends calling. I answered, and it was a strange male voice asking desperately if I could hear them, then faded to static. I asked friends when they returned what they wanted, and they had no clue what I was talking about and showed that they hadn't called me. I quit visiting, but a couple of times in my own home, I felt someone sit on my bed while laying down, and no one was there. After I moved, I haven't had any strange happenings. Friends say nothing weird has happened to them. I met another family that used to live in that house, and they too had nothing strange. It was just strange and quite frightening, to be honest. I was a grown man and felt pure dread crossing that yard when walking 2 blocks home. Horror rules. Follow-up to my house. This is an email in reply. I have noticed you made a mistake when taking care of my home. Due to the lack of, well, your existence, I have to assume you went in the basement. Curiosity did kill the cat after all. You're probably wondering where you are right now, and so I'm going to help you out. I am not John, by the way. If you manage to escape, you shall meet me. Rule number 1. This is not a safe space. Not a singular area is completely safe. Don't fall asleep in dark or open areas. Rule number 2. If you hear a scream, scream back. This may seem stupid, but it makes them think you're one of them. Rule number 3. Email is your only form of communication. Don't use texts. Just don't. Rule number 4. While you are technically immortal in this place, when you die, you're sent to the abyss. That's another story. Rule number 5. Glowing red lights are really dangerous. Don't go underneath them, unless you like having your skeleton violently ripped out of your own flesh. So, those are the base rules. There are some creatures you should pay attention about, though. So I'll list them and their own rules. Creature number 1, the skinlings. The skinlings are small, humanoid creatures without much facial features. They hunt and live in packs of 20 to 50, but are sometimes bigger. The biggest I've ever found is a pack of 253. Do be friendly and unthreatening. Don't try and attack them or scream. Creature number 2, screamers. These are the things that scream. Tall, skinny humanoids that have extended necks, no eyes. Do scream back at them. Don't scream when you haven't been screamed at. Creature 3, runners. Undescribable due to their speed, very fast. Do hide when the lights flicker. Don't shout at them and stand in the open. Creature number 4, Shadow Man. Harmless, but does alert every creature in your nearby vicinity to go to that area. Can cause problems. Do avoid eye contact and physical interaction. Don't interact with them in any way or look at them. That's about it for the creatures as well. All you need to know is that it's quite dangerous here. Explore until you find the red arrows. Follow them. They lead to me. We will meet again soon. Horror rules. Happy holidays, everyone. We here at Amazon strive to sell you the best quality products from some definitely 100% humane work environments. Admittedly, it can be stressful every season to find the right gifts for all your family and friends. But we can help you find the perfect presents. Of course, not everything on Amazon is perfectly safe. So, before we do any shopping, let's lay out some basic ground rules. Number 1, when you enter the site, check its name. If there is a mistake in the spelling, you are not on the correct site. If so, exit and keep trying different sites until you find Amazon. Number 2, when you get to the right site, log in. No worries here, just important to do. Number 3, if you have light mode on and see any dark spots or one dark mode and see white spots, they will try to get you to click on a specific product. It is not recommended that you do this. Number 4, search up the product you want to find and don't click on the result with any names either more than 7 words or with huge spelling mistakes. I will now help you find the product you want. You still must be careful. Number 1, it seems you want to get your nephew a video game. Remember to get him the disc with the correct console. Number 2, when you find the game you want, check the title for the before-seen things. When it comes to media like games, books, or movies, you can discount the amount of words, though check for correct spelling. Number 3, check the description. We'll tell you if it's fake. Most commonly, the description will tell you the previous buyer's fate. This will happen to you if you buy the product. Just avoid these kind of odd descriptions. Number 4, check the reviews. If there are no reviews, or if the reviews talk of torture and death unrelated to said product, just don't buy the product. Number 5, if the delivery time says the product will come within 5 hours, reload the site. No human can make it that fast. Number 6, if it all seems well, put the product in your cart. I'd recommend double checking to make sure everything is correct. Don't want any strangers with your address. Now, let's say everything went wrong and you ordered a fake product or gave your address via visiting the fake website. Don't worry, I can help you there as well. Number 1, usually the car that pulls up is a Toyota. Any other brand and it's a fake. Number 2, The other sign to be sure it's fake is the name. If the deliverer says their name is either Glenna or Melissa, you're safe. These are our employees, otherwise they are fake. Now listen to me very carefully. This fake is not your friend. It is your worst imagination. But don't fear. I will tell you how to stop the beast. Number 1, it will ask to come inside for tea. Say yes, even if you don't have tea. The beast knows. Number 2, if you have tea, don't tamper with it. Just serve it normally. If not, offer it water and explain kindly you have none. The beast doesn't care if they get the tea or not. Number 3, pretend to make yourself tea or to get water. Position yourself where you can grab a sharp knife and hide it instantly. Number 4, go to sit down. The beast should start talking about the weather. Don't interrupt. It hates that. Number 5, the most important bit. When the monster says, "Anyways, I must be going," go to shake its hand. If it walks off, they all know where you live. Number 6, when you go to shake its hand, swiftly pull your knife out of your pocket and stab it in the forehead. It's the only place guaranteed to kill the monster. And you've done it. You survived. Sure, it sucks. You have to buy the game again, but at least you are still alive. Sincerely, Amazon.com Incorporated. Horror rules. First off, ditch Jerry. He's a dumbass. I don't get why you're friends with a guy that clutches a pillow with some 2D image on it and smells like a mixture of sweat and Cheetos. But ditch him. Seriously. Second, even if I say that, I know you're going over to his house to work on your history project, and you're probably going to attend regardless of what I say. So I'll at least give you some rules so you walk out fine. Number 1, Jerry will give you a list of rules when you go over to his house. They'll sort of be accurate, but can also be really confusing. I'll clear it up for you. He's been browsing this weird subreddit, so now he writes his house rules in a strange way. Number 2, the first rule you'll see is something like, "Don't go in the basement, they get mad." That "they" is Jerry's other friends. A bunch of sweaty college kids who definitely have not showered or seen the light of day in years. Don't go down there because the stench might just kill you. And I'm only half joking. Number 3, don't turn on the lights downstairs either. Those college kids really hate the light and will go crazy if you even somewhat turn it on. Because one of them will have to go out of their little man cave and turn it back off. Honestly, I'd say just leave them be. Keep the light in the basement completely off. Number 4, if you break either rule 2 or 3, just say sorry. Jerry's list will probably say something like, "They will get angry, kiss," or something like that. And yeah, they will get angry. But saying sorry will make them leave you alone. They really just want to stay in their room and play games. They can't fight. Number 5, for all that is holy, do not ever enter the bathroom. Honestly, it might even be better to take a tinkle outside in the bushes. Jerry does not clean that place up at all. And if you go in there, that stench will stick to you, and you'll probably never live a normal life again. Number 6, if you see 2 red lights outside that look like eyes, just ignore it and ignore Jerry too. He has a heart attack whenever it happens and goes to his room to barricade it, usually screaming something like, it's they are here." But it's just the neighbors' kids being idiots. Shrug it off. Number 7, I actually do try staying away from the mirrors in the house. Not because they're haunted like Jerry says, but because they're all in the bathroom and covered in God knows what. Ugh. They're disgusting, and I'd say stay away from those mirrors if you can. Number 8, stay in the light. You don't know what awful things you might step on if you can't see what's in front of you. And that's a real problem because I'm pretty sure you don't want to buy a pair of new shoes. The light is your friend. Number 9, don't enter Jerry's room. It's not just like the bathroom. It's even worse. Stay out of it. You'll inhale Cheeto dust. Your eyes will be burned by the sight of whatever weird things he has in there. And if he's gaming, your ears will be subjected to the worst sound imaginable. Please do not intrude on him. Number 10, if you break any of the rules here or on Jerry's list, he'll probably tell you to kill yourself. Don't do that. I don't know why he's so aggressive, but I think he's been watching this one Twitch streamer called Lewd Tear God or something like that. Guess he picked up the bad habit. But yeah, just ignore him when he says that. Honestly, I really have no clue why you're even going to Jerry's house. You could probably finish the school project on your own and save yourself the trouble of going to the den of death. Either way, good luck with surviving that place. I'd say have fun, but I know you won't. So have a tolerable experience. That's all I can really give you. See you later. Let's not meet. Sorry in advance, I was drunk most of the time during what happened, so I don't remember every last detail. When I was 18 and freshly broken up with my way older boyfriend, I basically went crazy with dating guys. At the time, I also dressed very goth, even going as far as to wear a real corset and trench coat, mostly just enjoying the attention. One particular afternoon, my friend and roommate at the time decided to eat at a local Japanese restaurant, with both of us all dressed up. Our waiter was a mediocre, skinny white guy who clearly was a little alternative, but it was hard to really tell with the uniform. We joked about me leaving my phone number on the receipt or something, so I hyped myself up and did so. Late that night, he had sent me a text. We talked for a few days, never really having a right time to meet up as I worked 40 minutes away from where I lived. He mentioned the boots he wore meant a lot to him and some other odd things that just seemed like edgy jokes. One really late night coming home, I was texting and driving, as any 18-year-old does, and we decided to meet up. My stupid self invited him over to my apartment, where it was just me and the roommate who had been with me before. Our other 2 roommates were not home. At first, it was fine because I was already drunk, so I would just let him rant about whatever he wanted. He went on about his life, going to jail, medical bills, his parents, etc. Eventually, he asked me if I wanted to see his tattoos, and I was like, all right. He lifted up his shirt, and not only could I see the handgun tucked into his waistband, but also his multiple badly covered up Nazi tattoos. One was even just slightly covered with a banana. I don't know what it was, but I simply decided the best way to deal with the situation was to appease him, so I went along with it casually. I don't remember exactly every detail because it was over 2 years ago, and of course I was drunk, but he ended up pulling his gun out and putting it to my head, asking me if I was scared. I was immensely confused and tried to call his bluff, saying I wasn't, which got him to put it away for a while. When we went to hook up in my messy-ass room, he pulled it on me again, saying he wanted to do it with it out. I got mad and tried to fight him off me and get it away from my head. Of course, I wasn't as strong as him, and he hit me in the arm with it, which that shit hurt, 'cause it was a nice one. When I finally got him off me, and he realized I was pissed and not scared, he started acting like a crackhead, saying I was crazy for not crying about him pulling a gun on me. He ran off, jumping the fence of the apartment complex and not even taking his car that he had came in. In the morning, his car was gone, and I had a large bruise from where he had hit me. While to me it's just a funny story, I now realize how bad it could have ended up. So, to the waiter from the Japanese restaurant, let's not ever meet again. Ouija board. I'll try to be brief as I've told this a few times already, but a friend was pestering me to play with the Ouija board. I refused multiple times as I was not interested in wasting time on a stupid Milton Bradley, or whatever, piece of cardboard nonsense. Eventually, I capitulated, in the spirit, no pun intended, of, if I don't do it with you, will you stop pushing it? Lo and behold, it did in fact work, and I became enthralled. Enthralled because it challenged every notion I had of reality. Some of the experiences featured contact with what claimed to be a deceased firefighter and things like that. During one session, with whoever, I asked if there is a God. Naturally, as this was already challenging the notion of a spiritual realm as science fiction. To this, the being became mostly notable animated, out of all the questions. And by animated, I mean it was clearly enraged, to the point where our fingers were slipping off the planchette as it skyrocketed across the board to squarely and forcefully land on no, not to be mistaken with spelling N-O. The most telling experience, however, was when I asked where the being was. The planchette moved across the board to spell C-H-A-I-R. We were huddled together on one side of a table with chairs to the left, right, and one directly across. I asked something like, if you're in the chair, prove it. Well, for shit's sake, and I'm sorry for swearing, but it fits the mood. The chair, directly across from us, lifted up and pulled out from the table in what I can only describe as a bizarrely jagged fashion. Just a disturbing, jagged fashion. It lifted and pulled out with no one anywhere near it. To make a long story short, after I stopped playing with the board, mainly because I had no one left to use it with, they became bored, but I was fascinated and wanted answers. I started to have strange experiences, such as waking up in the middle of the night, feeling like I was being held down and choked, or seeing a black shadow figure pacing across the room. It should be noted that after moving in with an aunt, who I never discussed the Ouija board with, she said she woke up to a shadow figure standing in her doorway. Let's just say I didn't stick around there for long. This was a long time ago, and I've been on a spiritual journey ever since. But I sometimes wonder if the reason why my life is so difficult is partly because of this, although there are certainly other contributing factors. I always take a risk sharing this story, and I'm just hoping none of it comes off crazy. These are difficult things to describe and are not adequately validated, often outright dismissed, in Western culture. I will say this though, don't let anyone diminish you for telling your story. A person who is staunchly convinced in their own mind that it can't be so is not the source of objective truth, rather being ignorant or spiritual matters. And they do keep selling the boards in stores for a reason, because it actually works. Ouija story. The moral of the story I'm about to tell is be careful when using the Ouija board. You never know what you may bring into your life. It can be bad, or it can open your eyes to the mysteries of the world. 3 years back, when I was just beginning to study the paranormal, me and one of my closer friends decided to do the Ouija board for the sake of, well, just doing it. I knew not to mess around with spirits, but she was curious and kept telling me it was all a joke, that the Ouija board didn't really call on spirits. She didn't believe in anything she couldn't see with her own eyes and thought the Ouija board was just a sleepover game for teenagers. We decided to create our own Ouija board, as I find it really works better with the energy of the writing and auroras. We sat down, lit candles, and called upon the spirits. We began to ask questions, and it answered. The planchette would move, like any other Ouija board. My friend, let's call her Lucy for the sake of the story, continuously asked me if I was the one moving it. I answered no. The ghost was named Emily and said she had died of childbirth. We continued asking questions, and she continued to answer. Nothing truly special compared to what I had seen in the past. We said our goodbyes to Emily and went to bed. Later that night, Lucy shook me awake. She kept saying she heard a banging on the window. To reassure her, I walked over to the window and looked outside. There was nothing. We both went back to bed until I woke up at about 2:40 a.m. I got up to go to the bathroom. I closed the door behind me, quietly, trying not to wake Lucy. I turned towards the mirror, and to my dismay, I saw a teenage girl standing beside me in the reflection. I usually don't get scared by this kind of stuff, as I've dealt with minor issues involving it in the past. But I guarantee if you saw a girl standing behind you in the mirror, you'd be freaked out too. I screamed, and me and Lucy stayed up the whole night after. At one point during the night, I heard a whisper saying, "It's all your fault, remember?" The next day, I called my mom. She was the one who introduced me to all things paranormal and supernatural, so I figured she was the best one to talk to. I told her all about the ghost in the encounter. The other line stayed quiet. I asked if she was still there. She proceeded to tell me that my great-great-great-grandmother died giving birth to a child, but that child survived and continued my family line. Emily was there in my house because she was related to me. Paranormal encounters. I don't know if it's okay to write about this, but I can't talk to anyone about it. I don't want people to think I'm crazy. And my friends who experienced this with me don't want to talk about it either. Yesterday, me and my 3 friends decided to go to camp in the middle of the night. I know it's super random, but with all that's going on in the world, we wanted to be in nature, and we just made our super stupid plan with huge hype under 1 hour, and jumped into our car and drove outside of the city. We drove to a small town out of the city and left our car there, since the woods or place that we can camp was not suitable for driving. It was super fun. We city boys carrying bags, tents, knives, food, and etc. It really felt fun, and nobody was scared or cautious, even though we were walking in the middle of the night, far from civilization, with the help of our smartphone flashlights. After some hours, we found a place which seemed mega cool. Cute little small lake and huge open area. We settled and put up our tents. 4 of us served in the Army. We all had survival training, so we were pretty calm and were not thinking about anything that can go bad out here. After finding our spot, me and one of my friends went away just to do the recon of the area, and the other 2 stayed next to the camp and gathered sticks and wood to light the fire. We were just chilling next to our fire and chatting and relaxing, joking about how fucking unlucky we are as a generation, and time passed just like that. Around 5 a.m., we decided to get in our tent and go to sleep, so we can wake up around 11 or something and still can use more daylight to do stuff. After 5 minutes, we get into our tent. We heard a cat meowing like she is in trouble. Me and my wife, we have 2 cats of our own, and I grew up in a house that was full of those furry assholes, so I understand that some cat outside is in trouble or hungry. We just all looked at each other and were a bit surprised about how a cat can survive in the woods like that, in the middle of nowhere. Maybe they can, I don't know. I grew up in the city. Correct me if I'm wrong. But we got out of the tent to check where the cat was, and we saw this black cat. Again, all of us were not superstitious nor religious. We started to feel a bit weird, like, dude, it's a black cat though. I had some sausages in my bag, so I got them out for her, and after 1 minute of sessions, calling the cat over and throwing food in her direction, she suddenly disappeared. Again, I was thinking that it's woods and it's dark, so she can easily disappear. I didn't think it was creepy, so I went back to the tent to go back to sleep. After 10 or 15 minutes, one of my friends told us that something is out of the tent. First, we thought either that's some wild dogs or our neighbor, black cat. We just opened the zipper of our tent a bit just to see what it was. It was a motherfucking huge-ass blacker-than-night wild boar. Okay, this seems pretty normal. There can be those things in the woods, but that thing was not normal. As we encountered or heard about those dangerous, ugly things before, we just sat in our tent trying to be mega quiet and just hoped that it won't attack us. For those who don't know, those jerks are mega dangerous, strong, fast, and their skin is like Kevlar. So even if you are packing heat, most bullets won't do any harm unless you shoot them in their ugly faces. I was just sitting there, scared shitless, and whispering with my buddies, like, what the fuck are we going to do if it decides to ram or tear our tent? We heard that cat meowing again. Suddenly, everybody had that reaction like, what in the hell is going on? And both of those animals were just moving almost 1 meter close to our tent, like they know each other. I felt so strange and telling my friends, like, why the fuck that thing doesn't do anything to the cat, or why that cat is so comfortable meowing and going close to it. I don't know, maybe someone can explain this to me in some rational way. But for me, our night was so scary and weird, and I am still in shock of that. For about 1 hour without attacking us, both of them just walked in circles around our tent and made us scared shitless. I don't know if it was something paranormal or not. Nothing made sense for us. Again, as I said, we were not so weirded out about first seeing the cat or its sudden disappearance, but that black, huge, wild thing and the black cat circling together of our tent make all of us scared. If anyone can give me an explanation, it would be most grateful. Thank you in advance. Unsolved Mysteries. The Disappearance of Amber Lewis. Early life. Very little has been publicly shared about Amber Lewis's childhood and early adulthood. We know she was born in 1988 to her mother, Donna, and that she has a stepfather named Tim Scott. She's also the mother of 2 children. Despite living what the Ontario Provincial Police, or OPP, call a high-risk lifestyle, she regularly kept in contact with them. She'd Snapchat her daughter daily. At the time of her disappearance, Amber was living in Hagersville, Ontario, Canada. However, She had connections to other locations in the region, including Hamilton, Norfolk County, Brantford, and Cambridge. Disappearance. The exact date Amber went missing is unknown. According to her family, she'd been out of contact since early February of 2021, with news publications reporting that she was last seen toward the middle to end of the month at a residence at 3698 6th Line in Oswego, Ontario. The rural community is located within Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. Amber was reported missing by her mother on March 8, 2021. This was largely prompted by her lack of contact with anyone in the family, especially her children. Investigation. The OPP's Criminal Investigation Branch took control of the investigation into Amber's disappearance, with assistance from the Haldimand County Detachment, the Six Nations Police Service, and the Brantford Police Service. Very little has been revealed regarding the investigation. However, the OPP has shared there's unconfirmed information that Amber may travel to Western Canada. In June of 2023, the OPP, with the help of the Six Nations Police Service, launched an evidence-based search of the property where Amber was reportedly last seen. The grounds were searched, as was the area behind the residence, which the Ellis family states has been empty for quite some time. Investigators wouldn't say what they were searching for or what type of evidence, if any, was found. Another search occurred on March 2024, this time at a property on First Line between Chiefswood and Seneca Roads. Investigators, with the aid of the OPP's Emergency Response Team, or ERT, and the Six Nations Police Service were expected to be at the site for several days, but wound up calling off the search later that day as no human remains were found. While they refused to state why they'd been drawn there in the first place, the search team did say the property owners are not considered persons of interest in the case. The OPP has interviewed dozens of individuals over the course of the investigation, with little headway made in the case. To help raise awareness and generate more tips, Donna created the Missing Amber Ellis Facebook group. Details. Amber Lewis was last seen sometime in February 2021 at a residence in Oswego, Ontario. She was either 32 or 33 years old at the time, and is described as having a thin build, standing at 5 foot 9 inches and weighing between 120 and 121 pounds. She had straight, long black hair and brown eyes. According to the OPP, Amber is missing some teeth with noticeable gaps. She also has a scar on her left thigh, the result of a stab wound, and a horizontal mark between her eyebrows. A Chinese symbol is tattooed on the nape of her neck. Case contact information. Amber's disappearance is currently being investigated as a missing persons case, with foul play suspected. The OPP is offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person or persons responsible. Anyone with information regarding the case is asked to contact either the OPP's Criminal Investigation Branch at 1-888-310-1122 or the dedicated tip line at 1-866-549-2090. Tips can also be submitted anonymously via Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Unsolved Mysteries. The Murder of Rachel Russell. Early life. Rachel Russell was born in Cobourg, Ontario, Canada, to Daniel and Elva. The family, who are of Mi'kmaq heritage, moved a few kilometers away to Port Hope, where Rachel and her siblings, Robbie, Shelley, Cindy, and Tracy, lived a typical middle-class upbringing. Rachel was outgoing, bubbly, and full of life. When speaking with the media, Her family once recounted that when she was 13, she and a friend hitchhiked to New York to attend Woodstock 1999 without their parents' knowledge. In adulthood, Rachel became a single mother to a young son. While close with her former partner, she lived with her parents in Campbellville Croft, where she worked as a dog groomer. This choice of career came as no surprise, as the young woman was an animal lover who'd previously been employed by the local Humane Society. Just prior to her death, Rachel had been struggling with health and addiction issues. After complaining of stomach pains, she underwent surgery for a burst appendix. During the procedure, it was discovered she had bowel cancer. The young mother was prescribed Oxycontin, a strong painkiller to which she became addicted. While she tried to get help and attend rehab, she found it very difficult to find a place that could help her get clean while she was battling cancer. The murder. On November 12, 2005, an individual was looking for empty beer bottles along a remote path in Coburg. The location near the intersection of Ontario and Division Streets was close to the east-west railway tracks, which are known to be frequented by drug dealers and users. During their search, this person came across the remains of an unidentified woman. Word of the discovery hit the local media. At the time, Shelley was driving a taxi for the family's cab company when she heard the report. Realizing she hadn't heard from her sister in a while, she called the Ontario Provincial Police and gave officers a description of Rachel's tattoos. It was then that the body was identified as the 29-year-old. An autopsy determined Rachel had died from blunt force trauma a couple of weeks prior to her remains being discovered. It's currently the belief of the OPP that she was killed at another location in mid-October before being dumped where she was found. Investigation. The OPP immediately launched an investigation into Rachel's death. Evidence led them to execute a search warrant on a nearby home, but this yielded nothing. A man by the name of Wayne Ryman was also arrested and charged with the second-degree murder, but the charge was dropped 7 months later as the Crown believed it would be difficult to secure a conviction. Investigators say the search for Rachel's murderer is still ongoing. They've spoken to hundreds of individuals and regularly contact the Russell family to keep them abreast of the investigation. The 29-year-old's loved ones believe it's likely that she knew the person or persons who killed her, and that her tendency to speak her mind may have been a factor in her death. Case contact information. The OPP is currently offering a $50,000 reward for any information that leads to the arrest and conviction of the individual or individuals responsible for Rachel's murder. Anyone with information regarding the case is asked to contact the Criminal Investigation Branch of the OPP at either 1-888-310-1122 or 705-329-6111. Tips can also be called into the Coburg Detachment at 905-372-5421 or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Phoenix, the narrator's choice. If you are not a fan of fiction, this is where you can end the video. This next story I'm about to read is a dear friend of mine, and I absolutely love his literature. The Loony Bin. Will you please stop calling it that? Kim barked in a hushed tone at her husband as the couple trailed shortly behind the head doctor of the institution. Well, that's what it is. Nick was uncomfortable there. Every so often a shriek or a deranged howl would erupt through one of the locked cell doors on either side. They sounded inhuman, making him shudder at the thought of his son being among them. More like a prison than a hospital. Right this way, please. Dr. Klex motioned for the couple to follow him into his office. The white, bare interiors of the hall's cramped administrative offices and common rooms were replaced by an immediate sense of reassuring coziness as they stepped inside and were enveloped by the all-wooden furnishings. Antique bookcases filled with various psychological and philosophical texts, as well as novels and biographies, were lined floor to ceiling, covering 3 of the 4 walls. Accentuating the small, meticulously trimmed bonsai tree centered behind the doctor on a quiche little chest of drawers below the window as he sat with his arms folded neatly atop his shiny mahogany desk. A sharp sliver of summer sunlight shone in overhead, and Nick felt somewhat at ease for the first time since they set foot into the old, stony building. The air hung intoxicatingly, while the aroma of old books and lingering sage incense reminding him of his grandfather's study. "I'd like to reassure you," Dr. Klex began as he thumbed through papers before picking on their son's file and having a look at it over the rim of his glasses, "that this institution prides itself on a sense of deep rehabilitative calmness. Your son, with some of the issues he's been having, will more than certainly benefit from an extended stay. We have a consistently high turnover rate when it comes to insanity." A small, mousy chuckle escaped the old man's thin lips, almost impeccable under the bushy gray mustache, like some benign ventriloquist's trick. He excused his forward attempt at levity with a short cough before continuing. "Well, insanity is a bit of a bad word for many people, and that's okay. It's one laden with centuries of frightful connotations, some more appropriate than others. We get a great many young men struggling with a range of complex psychological and behavioral disorders, many of whom have acted out violently as a result." The couple listened intently, both clearly uncomfortable but determined to do what was best for their boy. "So please, if you have questions, any at all, don't hesitate to ask." Kim had made the arrangements. The conversation she had over the phone with a nurse had calmed her initial reservations, but actually being there had revived a deep concern inside her. It was, after all, Lashbrook Psychiatric Hospital, formerly Lashbrook Asylum for the Criminally Insane before the scandals. "Doctor?" she started, as tactfully as she could. "Things really are different here now, aren't they? We heard about some of the things that happened to the patients, I mean." She squeezed her husband's hand tighter in hers. "Ah, yes. That's usually the first question. Perfectly understandable." Dr. Klex removed his thick-framed glasses and rubbed the lenses tentatively with a silk handkerchief. "While it was many, many years ago, I find it a societal imperative that we, as a people, not allow ourselves to forget such tragedies so easily. I'm glad you brought it up, quite frankly." He slid the glasses back on, and the brown legs vanished into his bushy gray hair. What remained of it, around the sides, anyway. The bald patch on top glistened, catching a blinding sun shimmer which adorned the pudgy elderly gentleman like a shining halo. Nick thought that, if he looked directly at it, he might very well go blind. He caught himself looking anyway, before remembering it was rude to stare so blatantly at people's bald spots. He glanced down at the floor in embarrassment as Dr. Klex met his gaze. "I haven't been the head of this facility for very long. Most orderlies are relatively new as well, In fact, only a very small number of staff remain from those terrible old days. The majority of them are nurses, and I assure you that they're all long been cleared of any wrongdoing. Nurses? Nick said abruptly before toning his voice down. But surely, when it came to the torture, surely nurses wouldn't have been present there, right? Are, are any of those nurses still employed here? Dr. Klex's face started to turn gray and solemn, like an ancient statue, choosing his answer carefully and summoning up tact of his own. As I said, all current staff have been cleared of any criminal wrongdoing. All instances of malpractice of the kind that you mention were directly overseen and sanctioned by my predecessor, Dr. Gosh, a man I thankfully never had the misfortune of meeting myself. Any staff present, or who assisted in such acts, were simply doing their job, as awful as it sounds. Just following orders, huh? The doctor read the outrage rising in Nick's voice, and he attempted to edify his position more clearly. That is what the courts decided, yes. Now, I can well say this institution is very different indeed. They all are, thankfully. For hundreds of years, places like these were simply seen as somewhere to permanently discard society's human refuse. Wretched souls deemed incurable and so left to rot in their own filth and misery. Manacled to the floor or to the wall or, on occasion, a bed if they were fortunate enough. And the experiments that were performed, the tortures, as you call them, they were seen as crucial steps in the name of scientific progress, a necessary evil, if you will. Evil is the right word, Kim piped up. In retrospect, I would most certainly agree. The road to hell is often paved with the best intentions, something my father used to say. He was deployed on the Western Front, a very stoic man and very wise. At least that's how I view him now. Again, in retrospect. The doctor seemed to lose his train of thought for a moment, staring past the couple into space. Nick cleared his throat, drawing Klex back to the present. Oh, but I digress. I apologize. Perhaps you'd be able to tell me a little bit more about your son? What he is like at home? Well, Kim began, impeded by a choke in her throat. She looked over to her husband, urging him to take the lead. Recently, doctor, in all honesty, it's been a living hell. It's as if he doesn't even have any interest in being a part of the real world. At first, he was skipping school, hanging around with a big crowd, and now it's just too much. Nick felt tears welling up in his own eyes, but he stifled them expertly, pushing it all deep down the way he'd been taught as a boy. Could you elaborate? Kleck started to reach for a box of tissues before drawing back his hand after noticing the glare in Nick's eye. I know these things can be difficult to discuss. No. It's all right, doctor. Let's just get this over with. Nick drew in a deep breath, squeezing his partner's hand even tighter as she held his, so tight that Kim had to wiggle free of his grip due to the pain. He's been killing animals, cats, dogs, you name it. We found a pit in the woods behind our house. Kim erupted into bubbling tears, unable to contain her grief any longer. Klex held out the box, and Nick took a few tissues, passed them along, stealthily holding one balled up in his palm just in case he also found himself in need of it. Well, that certainly is disconcerting. Can you tell me when it began? No, we can't. Nick found himself reminiscing, against his will, of simpler times before his son began to change, when they were all still happy. But that pit, some of them were just bones from what I could see under the mess of it all. Kim's cries intensified. She excused herself, choosing to wait in the hallway. As the doctor closed behind her, Nick knew he was on the verge of losing it himself. He turned to Dr. Klex, eyes watering, pleading. "Please, doctor, will you help him?" "We'll do the best we can, Mr. Jones. You have my word on that." With that promise, Nick Jones joined his wife and they collapsed into each other's weary embrace. Together, they sobbed quietly as they made their way back through the hospital grounds and out into the parking lot. Phoenix, the narrator's choice. If you are not a fan of fiction, you can go ahead and skip to the end or go ahead and end the video here. This is also another one of my favorite authors. Here we go. The Walls Whisper. Anita had only lived in her new home for 2 days before strange happenings already had her questioning her own sanity. Having been a skeptic her entire life, she certainly did not believe in ghosts. Yet, her current situation was one that left her both intrigued and terrified, with absolutely no explanation whatsoever for the voices coming from the walls. Whispers, to be precise, crying out her name in hushed, terrified-sounding tones that were enough to make the blood of even the most brave run cold. "Who's there?" Anita asked timidly, trying but failing to maintain a sense of confidence in her voice. "Show yourself. Do I want whoever it is to reveal themselves?" Doubt began to cross her mind like a corruption, slowly consuming every last piece of bravery she could muster. The old Victorian home creaked as she made her way down the hallway towards the ladder which led up into the attic, a place she hadn't checked yet. Anita paused just before reaching the ladder, tilting her head towards the sound inside the wall on her left. She pressed her ear against it. "Help me, please," came a chilling whisper. "This isn't funny," she began, fiercely banging on the wall, hoping this was all some bad dream. "I'm gonna call the police." She pulled out her phone, only to find that the battery had completely drained, despite her being absolutely certain that she had charged it only 20 minutes prior. "What the fuck?" she thought, as she vigorously tapped the blank screen, feeling weirded out even further. Suddenly, a loud thud shook the ceiling above her head, sounding like something heavy hitting the floorboards up in the attic. Anita shook with fear, her heart feeling as if it were about to explode while eyeing the ladder. "Just run," her inner voice of self-preservation screamed. Hesitantly, she began to climb the ladder. The attic had a stale stench to it, like dust infused with mouse shit, a smell which wasn't pleasant. Yet, she could just about bear it while rummaging around the pile of boxes, looking for the source of the thud. She noticed something laying on the floorboard. It appeared to be a journal. She picked it up and wiped away the dust before opening it up to read. "I don't know if anyone will read this, but I have nobody else to turn to. It's been 2 weeks now, and I'm still trapped in this damned house. I'm beginning to think that this place could be alive. starting to think the voices in the walls are my own speaking to me. But maybe I'm just going insane. Whenever I try to leave the house, I enter a kind of loop, ending up straight back in the living room again. The whispering is getting louder now, and my sanity is declining. Am I dead? Is this purgatory? One thing I know for sure is that I'm well and truly fucked. Signed, Anita. Phoenix, narrator's choice. Home invasion. It was 11:21 p.m. and Sarah and her boyfriend, Tom, were both cuddling up on the sofa, playing Mario Kart together. Their eyes were red due to the fat bong rips that had partaken in shortly before. They were both so focused on the game that neither one of them noticed the pale face peering in through the window behind them, watching with hollow eyes. "Told you I was the Mario Kart queen, babe," Sarah said, after winning the race. Tom threw down his controller. That was just a warm-up," Tom replied, as he grabbed the bong and loaded it up for another hit. And as Sarah and Tom both inhaled the weed into their lungs, the face continued to watch them from behind. Now it was smiling with rows upon rows of sharp black teeth, while it held the palms of its ghostly white hands up to the glass. Tom began coughing violently, and Sarah laughed. "Don't go dying on me, will ya?" Sarah said jokingly. Tom decided he needed some water. He got up and proceeded to the kitchen. But on his way out, he saw something at the window in the corner of his eye. He looked at the window and he screamed. "What the fuck?" Tom yelled. But the second he blinked, the thing at the window had gone. Sarah began to share Tom's unease and was staring at the window confused. What's the matter?" Sarah asked. Tom rushed to the window and looked outside. He saw nothing. "I saw something looking through the window," Tom said, his voice shaky. Sarah laughed. "You're such a lightweight." Tom became annoyed. "I am not a lightweight. I know I saw something." Tom was interrupted by somebody banging on the front door so hard that the hinges shook. Sarah screamed, and Tom ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife and cautiously approached the front door. He looked through the spy hole and saw nothing. He then gestured to Sarah to wait inside while he went out to check. He opened the front door cautiously, with a knife ready in his hand, and stepped outside. It was empty. Nothing but a cool breeze drifting through the night air. Tom walked around the front and made his way towards the fence leading into the backyard. His eyes widened when he saw the side gate was open, and when he heard glass smashing, followed by Sarah's terrified screams, he ran as fast as he could to her. "Sarah!" Tom shouted as he made it to the front door. But he was too late. The front room was now splattered with blood, and Sarah's body sat upright on the sofa. All of her skin had been flayed, leaving only exposed flesh and muscle. Something was written on the wall in blood behind her. "Poor woman all alone. I take her skin and leave the bone." And that, dear Embers, brings to a close 2024 Your Favorite True Stories Part 2. I will say this, 2024 was a fantastic year. Here's to a new year, 2025, and here's to many, many, many more great stories. I would like to take a moment and recognize the subscribers of Back to Ashes, as you can see them rolling on your screen. You all are the glue that holds this channel together, and I am forever indebted to you. Thank you so much for your support. To all of the new or the peekaboos, thank you so much for checking out Back to Ashes and your support by simply watching or interacting with the videos. For without all of you, the members, the subscribers, the new people, or the peekaboos, without you, I would not have a voice and there would not be a channel. Thank you all so much for sticking around and supporting everything this channel has to offer. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you kindly. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these collections. Until next time, please stay safe out there. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.